So, good afternoon. My name is Tim Cherubini. I'm Executive Director of COSLA, the Chief Officers of State Library Agencies organization. And I and my colleagues are here to do an abbreviated session as folks finish up their lunch today on the topic of continuing education for librarians. And this is something that we've touched upon that's come up in a couple of the different conversations today. In fact, we were all just talking about how the notes that we had put together to talk with you about now have many, many annotations on them based upon the discussions today. So this will be very fresh, I think. We have just three projects that we want to tell you about today, three areas that we've worked in to both share information about our experiences, to raise awareness of some of the issues that we encountered, and perhaps touch upon some trends and gaps, and we hope also some good information for our IMLS on future directions for funding. So I'm going to start just brief introduction to the speakers. As I mentioned, I'm Tim Cherubini, Executive Director of COSLA. We also have Chrystie Hill, who is Community Relations Director for OCLC. We'll be hearing from her third, and we're going to start with Ann Craig, who is Director of the Illinois State Library. So with that, Ann, I'll turn over the podium to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Tim. This year, we have 10 state library agencies concurrently conducting iLead in their home states thanks to a grant from IMLS. 10 state libraries. Let's hear it. Ooh. There you go. So iLead was designed to be exportable in the first place. We did this because state library agencies have very limited resources, and our administrative structure has worked very well. The same in each state. Well, the days of the sessions, the keynoters are broadcast, different in each state. Well, we tailor the sessions to the team needs. The biggest lesson learned, though, is that commitment from the top down and the bottom up, essential. Without engaged support from our sister state libraries, this ambitious program could not function. So, the primary goal of iLead is to identify a community need like joblessness or English as a second language, and then using technology tools and leadership skills to address that need. Why do we do iLead U? Well, Illinois has almost 2,000 multi-type libraries, and we hear from librarians they want to be more connected with their constituencies. Sometimes they just don't know how. iLead gives them the time and the sandbox and the skills to do just that. How does iLead U work, you say? Well, teams of 5 library staff come together to make a product. Each team has a mentor, and each person on the team has a partner back home, a community representative who gives feedback about the team product during the program. We meet 3 times in person, and each session has its own deliverable. So at the end of the program, in October, each team has a great product that addresses the need they're trying to meet. In March, the teams make a video. Oops, sorry. Okay, yes. They make a video, mostly to help them focus, but also to gel as a team. This is a group of Chicago law librarians that built tools for law students. Yeah, so we're in Springfield, guys, okay? Mr. Lincoln. Yeah. In June, we have a poster session to help the teams work on their elevator speech, or in this case, their elevator music. This group is the Robot Test Kitchen that helps library staff understand robotics. In October, it's the big reveal. And here's a team of 5 different Chicago Public Library branch librarians talking about their project to make transportable video story kits for their 80-odd branches.
I'm Josh, and I work in West Garfield Park. Now, every day I go into that library and I see all around me these personal, great, positive things happening. I see, you know, a teen planting lettuce in the community garden. I see a guy sitting there quietly playing checkers with his grandson. Now, if you search for news articles on West Garfield Park, you get man shot and killed. You get see drugs and arrests and murders and theft. Practically everything going on record about the neighborhood is these tragic human stories after tragic human stories. Now, iLeadU has given us tools to start putting on record the more personal and the more positive side of life in the neighborhood.
Also in October, the teams described for the record how, if another library wanted to replicate their project, how they could do it. This is Team Libris, academic librarians who built an institutional repository.
Do you think that any library could use this product that you've created?
Yes, we do. It's one of the things that we've talked a lot about as the project has progressed. And though obviously we first and foremost focused on the libraries that are members of our consortium, I think one of the strengths of this is that it really can be used by anyone, anywhere. Not just looking at other schools who want to join our specific repository, but really any other school or group of schools that wanted to get started. This concept of a box, a model to follow, you're not starting from scratch.
We tell them from the beginning they cannot fail because the experience is about the journey, not the end product. We emphasize learning to work in teams, leaving the library to go to where the constituents are, and growing leadership skills, all with the goal of connecting in very concrete ways. The state libraries involved have substantial skin in the iLead game. May be difficult, though, for other state libraries to continue in coming years without support. It takes time to build momentum and recognition among the state's library community. The big so what? Our evaluator tells us that transformative learning is actually occurring and that the projects have produced substantial benefits. Does iLead really matter? Many of our sister state libraries are using iLead to accomplish focused projects. Here's Team Spectra working on a technology product to help librarians address the needs of patrons on the autism spectrum as part of our National Leadership Forum grant. We've had countless groups go on to do conference presentations, workshops, and like the engaging ones, apply for and receive grants. This year, we had 2 finalists, the Library Space Camp and a winner of the Night News Challenge, Make It at Your Library, come out of iLeadU. Last year's Robot Test Kitchen that you saw earlier with the ukulele is doing a tech soup program next week. To wrap it up, here's a Doesn't Matter video from last year.
iLead has given me the time, the opportunity, and the resources to learn about a variety of subjects I never would have heard about. There have been fantastic speakers. I have developed great relationships with the people in my group, and I've been able to do a lot of networking here in Springfield. And I feel that my team has created a really good and useful project, and I feel we're contributing to the field of librarianship.
Yeah, I signed up for iLead because I needed to learn more about technology, but I ended up learning a lot more about myself than I thought I would, and about leadership and how to become an active agent in my own library and do good things.
You might recognize David in that picture. He's the head of our instructor corps, and this is graduation. So that's iLeadU in a nutshell, and now I'll turn it over to my co-presenters. Thank you.
Thanks, Ann. Wow. You know, not only are we doing this over lunch, I'm speaking to, it's after Ann. And that's just such an energetic project. Really love it and look for more good things to come out of it. Now, not that this next project doesn't have energy around it, it's just a little different. And I should note that Anne actually has played a key role in the project I'm going to tell you about a little bit now. The COSLA received a grant from IMLS under the Laura Bush 21st Century Program about 15 months ago. We're actually wrapping the grant up as we speak. The work concluded, the bulk of the work concluded at the end of April, and we're in some kind of final stages with some of the evaluation. This grant is called, we've called it the Connector Project, and I want to explain why we use that word connector. And one of the ideas or concepts behind this project was to break down some silos and then actively connect the remnants of those broken down silos to create a new mode of production. And what were these silos, and how did we put things back together on them is what I'm going to talk with you about today. So the problem, the silos that we were looking at, and the problem really that we were trying to solve, is that across state library agencies, it is very common to find within that agency a person or a small group of people who are dedicated to providing continuing education for librarians within that state. This group of people has actually been very inventive over the years, and they themselves have been getting together informally for well over 20 years. Yet, they were seeing, and we were all seeing, that there was a lot of redundancy in what was being produced, how it was being produced, topics that were not being addressed because there wasn't enough time for each agency to do it on their own. So working in, even though these folks were talking to each other, there were still some pretty heavy silos in how the work of producing continuing education programs was being done. So the Connector Project was developed and really had two aspects. One was to really take a look at this problem and see what we could do about it, and it really stressed a very close look at co-development and co-delivery of continuing education across state library agencies. The second aspect of the Connector Project was to also connect COSLA and this aspect of COSLA to other types of institutions and projects to further leverage this idea of collective action. So on the first aspect of the project, which is the co-development co-delivery, I mentioned that the continuing education professionals did have a history of working with each other and accomplished quite a bit. But in much the same sense that Anne was talking about commitment, what COSLA really wanted to test is that wouldn't this all be even better if not only the continuing education coordinators at the agencies were working together, but if they involved the library development directors, also a common role within state library agency staff that's very outward facing, and the state librarians, or the chief officers of the state library agencies. Bringing these three roles together, this was the hypothesis of the project, would give better result in the sense that there would be greater commitment, there would be greater variety across what people were going to be able to bring to the table, greater chance of very solid community connections, greater chance for sustainability in the long run because you would have more involvement from a broader spectrum of folks within the agency. So the project really focused on bringing together these three roles into a coordinating committee approach. We actually had 4 state librarians, 4 library development directors, and 4 continuing education coordinators serve together over a 12-month period, 12 or 13-month period, to actually look at this problem of co-development and co-delivery of continuing education. There was actually a step in this too, which was that we asked this group to formalize, take a look at the infrastructure, the environment that we had around some of the inputs to developing continuing education. What were the resources that we had? What was the infrastructure that was in place for this? Some of this was fine-tuning because the continuing education group had been sharing information all along. But the coordinating committee took this a little step further and did things like kind of up the game a little bit on developing a resource directory. They took the state reporting, the state profiles that were being developed, and developed them even further, brought them to a different level. They took this idea of needs assessment one step further and produced products that actually helped create a base of knowledge from which decisions could be made about where were the best opportunities for co-development and co-delivery. All of this was really the coordinating committee's work, established a consistent and a really supportive environment for this collective action. Now, one of the things that occurred throughout the project is that at first the coordinating committee took the lead on all of the pieces of work, but as time went on, it became apparent that even with that many people on the coordinating committee in that range, there was benefit to bringing other folks in, depending on what the topic was, from other aspects of state library agency work. So they moved into more of a working group model. The coordinating group kind of was the steering the activity, completing some of the work itself, but then also subdividing and in some cases bringing in other people from other state library agency roles to complete other aspects of the work. All of this proved very, very beneficial because the amount of product, the number of deliverables that this group was able to produce in a 12 or 13-month period actually exceeded what we had originally planned. And through some surveying that we had done throughout, it became apparent very early on that this was such a hit that COSLA should really, consider find a way to continue this. And I'm very happy to say that after looking at the results, after talking with the folks who were involved in it, after looking at the deliverables, the COSLA board did vote to continue this whole effort of the Connector project and basically operationalize it, making it part of our day-to-day activity. So the grant was successful in that the approach was proven. We learned a lot from it. There was a demonstration of commitment, which was greatly needed because there are so many things going on that if you don't have the commitment of the organization behind it and leaving it totally to volunteer effort, that's a lot of pressure on the volunteers. And we are institutionalizing it. We are in the process right now of putting together the follow-up committee and the follow-up effort to the Connector project as the grant ends. So as this work continues, there are still some open questions and some gaps, and perhaps some of these will turn into funding opportunities as well. One area that I'll be asking the committee the successor committee, we haven't named it yet, to really take a look at is the criteria for topic selection when it comes to where they'd like to go in terms of the co-development, co-delivery. The topics that were selected during the grant cycle were training for folks who were stepping into library director roles for the first time. What do we call it? Library Director 101 training. And that was a good topic. We think that's going to have a lot of traction. Second topic that was really given a lot of attention was training for library trustees. Again, something that I think is universally known to be a need and is being addressed in various ways by various organizations. But one thing that we're going to challenge the group moving forward is to really look at their criteria for topic selection and build out for the greatest impact. Make selections for the greatest impact on state library agencies. And this may not be the top vote getter in a survey. And as this morning when we were talking about the different kinds of skills that might be needed, this came to mind because I think you do want to know what the top vote getters are in a survey. But we also want to encourage this committee to look at what are some of the more challenging, newer types of things, some of which were in the room this morning, that may not ever end up being a top vote getter on a survey because of the way the surveying is done and it's a disparate process, but we know deserves some attention and could be given good attention by this particular configuration of folks. When it comes to those assessments, we do want to look at greater sharing of needs assessment data. COSLA has developed some and will develop some more, and we know there is other data out there about what is it that librarians feel that they need in terms of their own continuing education. We want to more fully consider the dissemination of the training and the other information that emerges from the product. I think that to some extent, we want to be turning outward more to explore new ways of teaching and learning and interacting that we're hearing about that are social and active that we may not actually apply to ourselves. That's important for us to do as well, especially as we see some shifts and we want to create some shifts in how librarians are trained and really pursue training on their own. We also want to identify the benefit of this shift of collective action within state library agencies. We are pretty close, I think, to be able to describe some case studies of what the impact of this new approach to public library training has been within a particular agency, and specifically, if this collective approach works, what can the agency do that they wouldn't have been able to do because the collective action is producing the product? Now, I mentioned that there was a second aspect to this connector project, and that was connecting COSLA and its continuing education efforts to other projects, to other efforts nationally. And rather than actually talk about that, we did that, but I'm actually going to turn to Chrystie now, because the project Chrystie is going to tell you about is actually one of the prime examples of where COSLA turned in terms of leveraging this collective action even beyond COSLA itself.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I strongly believe that staff in our institutions, libraries, archives, and museums, is our greatest asset. And so I love being on the stage with my esteemed colleagues, but also in the room with all of you who also hold that so dear. It also makes me a little nervous because I'm like, these guys are my friends. So I appreciate the chance to share about this project with you. The Coalition to Advance Learning is a broad coalition of archives, libraries, museums, and their allied institutions. We're all committed to working together and in deliberate coordination and across all of these boundaries to both devise and strengthen continuing education and professional development programs that will not only transform our workforce, but also lead to measurable impact on our nation's communities. No big deal, right? We can do that. This group was founded by 22 members that include individuals, institutions, and service organizations from the archives, libraries, and museum sectors. 5 of those founding members work from archives, 5 represent museums, 10 represent libraries of all different types, and 2 of those organizations work effectively across all 3 sectors. So where did this project come from? In early 2013, OCLC actually had much smaller ambitions, and that was to gather stakeholders from across public and state library spaces to discuss a shared approach to continuing education for public libraries across the nation. We really wanted to just very informally host a discussion with some of the key stakeholders about how we might set a few shared priorities and then work on a few things together, but do so in a more deliberate way than we have been. So I was on the phone with Bob Horton, who was the Associate Director of Library Services at the time, sharing with him what our plans are, asking him if he'd like to be included, and he said, wait a minute. We are interested in exactly that same challenge, but we're interested in it across library types, but we're not going to stop there. We're interested in museums and archives as well. So immediately this much smaller but still ambitious conversation expanded very, very broadly to the full spectrum of audiences that IMLS is working with. So we decided to join forces, and we co-hosted a day-long meeting where we spent some time really getting to know each other across sectors, identifying that there actually are shared needs, that there are a number of assets that we all have to work with, that we had agreement on what some of the key gaps were and how we might fill them. And then at the end of the project, we did this really, the day, we did this really fun thing where we did mock project pitches to each other that had been developed very rapidly in 10 or 15 minutes in a cross-sector way, so people in different sectors sitting at the table. And that gave us that initial insight that we had made a step towards working together more effectively and in a very concrete way on some of these shared interests and needs. So one of the major outcomes from this meeting was that several of us went back to our home institutions, back to our desks with a new commitment to both develop and embed a cross-sector approach to our work. The CE Connector project actually came out of that meeting day. Anne was with us in the room. Some of the work that we advanced in the leadership area was based on her talking about I lead in that room, and we identified that there's a whole host of leadership-related activities that across sector we could be doing together. What OCLC did is we went back to our desks and we wrote a grant with input from that original group that would more formally launch and then provide some starting structure for additional joint work together. What we imagined very simply was that if we got together, we could actually do CE and PD better together, that the time was right to scale learning programs and infrastructure not just up, but also across all of our sectors, not just for the benefit of the organizations that would participate, but ultimately for the benefit of those that we serve. So with funding from IMLS, the group first met in March of last year. So we've been working together for 14 months now to consider the challenges and initiate efforts to develop approaches for future collaborations. Subsequent supplementary funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and then IMLS again enabled us to go beyond that first meeting and meet in person in October and then again in March of this last year. So what have we accomplished? Well, the first thing is we formed and we stormed, and we're just now getting to the norming part. People who have been in those rooms are laughing because they were there. Diane said earlier it's a little bit like dating. I think some people in that first meeting would say, bad date. Really bad date. So, you know, we had to work through some things in order to come back for that second date and come back for the third date and realize, okay, this is actually going somewhere. So we created a set of guiding principles. We strengthened our representation from the archives and museum sectors. We created coalition communication channels, and this is actually amazing that all three sectors have agreed on a single website, single messaging, Twitter stream, etc. We started showing up at our own and each other's meetings to talk about the work and our intentions. And this is really important. We firmly established that our work is not about us, but about the work we might do together. So any of the talk about governance or who we are as a coalition has been really light-handed. It's been very intentional that we want to be informal and a broad coalition. We need some structure, some support, some work on that, but it's really more about the projects and the partnerships. A little bit about what we've done in the projects and partnerships space. We identified very early on that we needed to learn more about the landscape across all three sectors. So in partnership with several organizations from the coalition, one member, Educopia, led by Catherine Skinner, led us in an effort to design an assessment project that would help us gain a better understanding of the full landscape, including a gathering and analyzing of all the data to assess the needs across the field. Once we have that, we'll see how we might look at the other side, how we're going to meet them. The other thing we did is we developed a joint strategy. Again, no small feat. We collectively developed the key strategies in support of the shared vision that I mentioned at the very top, and we'll be publishing that next month. I won't tell you what's in it. This can just be a little trailer for that. But the fact that these three sectors and all library types got together and said, here are the four main things that we need to do together in the continuing education and professional development space is really, I think, quite remarkable. The other thing that we did is we created a prototype for cross-sector learning program. You can see here we've got the research assessment people taking one thing forward. These were the people in that initial group that said, I just want to do something. Let's see if we can get something done together. And so they sat at a table or in a room, worked together online over a number of weeks until they actually made something happen. They identified that project management was a key need across all the sectors. Everyone agreed it was high priority. So they worked together to develop a Project Management 101 webinar series and really test that hypothesis first, that we were actually capable of working together on a real concrete thing, but also that audiences could learn together and find value from that common curriculum. We had over 1,400 registrations for that first session, and the participants were just crazy in love with the idea that they could actually be learning in the same room together, and talked about what an enriched process that was. So what's next? A lot of stuff. Most of it is about projects, things that we want to do together next. I've been told that my time is up, so you'll have to catch me at a break if you want to hear about what some of those are. But I can guarantee you it's been very exciting to see, just with a little bit of support, a little bit of FaceTime, a lot of commitment from the people in the room. We've actually turned thinking, planning, strategizing into real concrete projects that we're committed to moving forward together. And if I may, I'll just very briefly say that personally, this has been an incredibly enriching experience for me. We talked about putting bright people in a room and letting them bounce off of one another. That is exactly what has happened in this space. We all talk about time, capacity, resources, how to operationalize these things so that it becomes a part of our work and our approach, and we're not necessarily dependent on a funder to help support that activity. All of that has been discussed, but ultimately I think the whole group is really proud of what we've been able to accomplish in just this short time together. I'd like to ask those who are in the coalition or represented by the coalition to please raise your hands so we can recognize those that are in the room today. Thank you. If your hand is not raised and you're interested, we invite you to join us. Thank you.